Okay, hopefully everybody's had a chance to join. People may join as we're getting started, but that's okay. So thank you everybody for taking time out of your day to join us. Really excited to kick this off. Our theme today is to provide advice and guidance, empowering individuals to take control of their career trajectory and journey in the software world. So big topic, super excited. I think our panelists have a lot of great things to say. Our agenda for today is to get through some moderated dialogue. We've got topics such as mentorship, career development challenges, self-advocacy, and then we'll take the questions from the event registration, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So first, let's start off by having our panelists, who I am lucky enough to call colleagues, give an introduction of themselves. Give us your name, your role, where are you sitting, how long have you been at 8th Light, and what were you doing in general before you joined 8th Light? Let's start with Kate.
Sure. Hi everybody. My name's Kaitlyn Concilio, pronouns she, her. I am currently a principal crafter here at 8th Light. I've been here about 2 years coming up next month. And I'm sitting in Phoenix, Arizona. Before I came to 8th Light, I was a newspaper editor and designer for a couple of years out of college. And then for the last 12 years, I've just been doing various kinds of development in healthcare, education, and a number of different fields. So that's me very shortly. So Eva?
Yeah, thanks. My name's Eva PenzeyMoog. I am pronouns she, her. Sitting in Milwaukee. I'm a principal designer, and I've been at 8th Light for just shy of 8 years. And before this, I was an operations manager at an education-focused nonprofit and also did rape crisis counseling. I'll pass it to Claudia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Claudia Vamesu. I'm based in Chicago suburbs. I'm a crafter. I've been with 8th Light for 2.5 years. Before joining 8th Light, I was a photographer and I owned an event photography business.
Awesome, thank you for that. Let's dive right in. I'll just kick off with some questions. Clay, let's start with you. Since you're warmed up and talking, we'll start with you. So you transitioned from studying law and doing photography to engineering. That's a huge pivot. What inspired you to make that change, and how did you navigate that shift?
Yeah, so back in high school in Romania, yes, I'm originally from Romania. So back in high school, computer science was just starting to make its way into the curriculum in that time. So I was super curious about computers. So I jumped at the chance to learn more. Even though we had to do most of our learning with pencil and the papers and shared one computer among all class. I absolutely loved it. I wanted to keep going with it in the college, but I hit a roadblock. In Romania, at that time, I was told it wasn't a career path for a girl. So I ended up studying law instead, but that computer science dream never really left me. So fast forward to 2019, I finally decided to go for it and pursue my tech dream. The timing was kind of perfect for me with all the COVID situation. In 2020, it give me the time to just start self-teaching, even attend the coding bootcamp. After I completed the bootcamp, as I was embarking in this quest to find companies to apply for, I stumbled upon 8th Light. Their values particularly caught my attention, and learning more and more about 8th Light sparked a strong desire within me to join this company. So motivated by this aspiration, I was just applying for the apprentice program I successfully navigate the interviews, and the rest, as they said, is history.
Okay, thank you. Eva, you said that your background is nonprofit operations, and you are now, you're one of our like most prolific designers, and you've written a book. That is a pretty big, diverse journey. Can you talk a bit about that? What motivated the transitions? How did you control your own trajectory?
Yeah, so I worked, I did 2 AmeriCorps years with that nonprofit and then joined staff as an operations manager. And one of my roles was to, like whenever someone was like, oh, my computer's going slow, I was just the person who had to like figure it out and like try to help them. So I spent a lot of time on the phone with the person at our headquarters who kind of like actually knew what he was doing. And he basically one day was like, I think you seem really interested in this. You should think about a career in tech. And I was like, absolutely not. I don't, like, I hate this stuff. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, actually, this is the part I enjoy about my job the most, because it's like actually interesting and challenging. And the role was very administrative, and I sort of felt like my brain was turning to mush, and I was like trying to figure that out. And I realized I started learning more about it. And I was like, if I work in tech, there's like always new things to learn. Things are constantly changing and evolving. So that was really appealing to me. So I actually did half of a coding boot camp, and then I dropped out on the last day that you could get your money back, and then found UX, and someone had to literally spell out that you don't have to be an artist to be a designer, which was, I just had no idea. I really thought that was a misconception I had. So anyway, I did a UX boot camp, and then found A Flight's apprenticeship, and have been here ever since. And in terms of taking control of my trajectory, there are a few things that I wanted to write on it. One is just like really going all in with what you're doing. A while ago, I taught like the remote part-time course for UX at that boot camp. And I noticed that the people who were successful were the ones who were like really, really dedicated. Some of them had quit their jobs to just like focus on this career transition. And then there were people who were doing it like really doing it part-time, like on top of a full-time job and lots of other responsibilities. And it is like a very privileged thing to be able to do, to quit your job and commit yourself full-time. But the people who couldn't do that just like really, really struggled to actually make the leap. And I think I took a loan to be able to do it. And went all in. And I feel like part of going all in brings me to like the piece of advice I wanted to share, which is that you're basically always interviewing for your next job. And even when I was doing my boot camp, I worked really hard. I took it really seriously. Like I was never shopping on my laptop when the instructors were giving lectures. And then at the end of it, one of the instructors, like a friend of hers, had an open role for like a junior designer, and she recommended me to interview for it. And I didn't end up working there. But like she like chose me to like interview, and I was like, oh yeah, because I've been like taking this, like I was like probably kind of extra compared to some of the people. I was like really hardcore about it, but like that, she like noticed that, and then she felt good about recommending me for this role with a friend of hers. So and having been on the other side of hiring, I've also been in situations where I'm like, oh, I actually kind of know this person, and they don't have a good work ethic, or they're like actually like have been super rude, and like that. So you just don't know like who's going to be looking at your resume, who's going to have an opportunity at some point and is going to remember you as like a really hard worker, or as someone who's not a hard worker. So I think it's important to just like realize that you should kind of always be on, and you're always interviewing for your next job.
Can I ask a quick follow-up to that? You talked about like going all in, being really dedicated, being a hard worker. Can you just list a signal or two that you got when you're working with a group of people? How do you know who's all in? How do you know who is that hard worker? If I'm a shy person who maybe doesn't want other people to know how much I'm struggling, and how much effort I'm putting in to make it look easy, are there any signals that you can think of that you've seen displayed that could help others maybe display those?
That's a great question. I think really taking advantage of like any extra opportunities that are out there. So like at boot camps, there was like office hours with the teachers, and they would put on little like networking events, and there were always like one-off sort of like, you know, an evening workshop of like level up your sketch skills, or now it would be Figma. And I would go to all of that stuff. And again, like this is really privileged. People who have other caretaking responsibilities, especially, is what's coming up. That's type of thing is really hard, but like trying to do those things when you can. And then I think, like, in response to what you said, Amanda, about maybe not wanting it to be clear how hard you're working or how hard you have to work, because yeah, I feel like there can be like imposter syndrome coming up there, or just insecurities in general. But I think being like more open about that kind of stuff, about like, I'm struggling, but I really, really want to understand, and sort of framing it like that, I think. And also having now been an instructor, it's like, I respect that so much, because people, like, they're going to know if you're struggling, like they're just going to know, and you can either be open about it and follow it up with like, and I really want to get better at this, or you can just like not say anything and like silently struggle and not actually get the help you need. So I think being open and a little bit vulnerable can be a good thing.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Kaitlyn, you've been promoted twice within the last year. That shows a ton of recognition. It shows that your skills have really grown. You're being recognized. You obviously have some really important contributions. Can you share what strategies or actions you believe were the most critical in achieving that sort of rapid growth?
Mhm. So I want to start out by saying, so I'm not saying I'm not amazing, because I definitely am, but I do want to point out, and I think it's important. I love the framing of this panel, which is charting your own course, but luck always plays a factor. And I don't mean luck like, I just accidentally happened to fall into a promotion, but things around opportunity and circumstances and situations. And I mostly say that because I have been in a position where I felt like I've worked really hard, and then whatever reason, that luck or that situation, that opportunity wasn't there. That's not a failing. And I want to make clear to everybody on the call, especially in, as we say, these are very tumultuous times for tech. It's not a personal failing that you don't get a job. It is more likely like you can work as hard as you can be the perfect fit, and they might have someone who's the more perfect fit, or they might really want someone who's local versus remote, or the job suddenly closed because they don't have the money to cover it. So don't take that as a personal thing, because luck plays a part in everyone's success. So that's the biggest thing I want to hit, if I hit nothing else. But as far as specific strategies, so I have been before I came to A-Flight, I was a lead developer and team lead. So I had some of the experience there. When I came into A-Flight, the first engagement I was on did not require a team lead, because we had a really good senior who was already taking care of that. So it gave me time to get used to how A-Flight worked, how the client we were working on was. But then when I went into my next engagement, there was a need for that team lead, even if it wasn't explicit in the role. So part of it, I would say, is making sure you fill whatever role makes sense for you, even if it's not exactly your job description. Obviously, don't go like, I would say, trying to do things that your company doesn't want you to do, or doesn't work for your team, but make sure that you're expanding to fill as much of the space as you need to, because that's how you grow, and that's how you prove your value. So I'd say that's the other thing that I've definitely learned in the last couple of years, is figuring out how to communicate the value that I bring. Because I have a really bad tendency to think, oh, if I know how to do something, then everyone knows how to do it, or everyone can easily figure it out. So I don't need to explain either how to do it, or that this was an important thing that I did. And so figuring out specifically, okay, because I'm here, this team was able to do X, or we were able to deliver Y for this reason. That allowed me to then go back to communicate and say, okay, I deserve a promotion because I was able to provide this value, which is a much different perspective. And I was like, oh, I just do my work and it's good. I think it's really good, but I don't know, which used to be how I went about things. So finding the specific value I'm able to bring really helps me to, I would say, advocate for myself.
I love that. And it's so important. Okay, we're gonna dive into that. I want to talk a bit about mentorship. Other people advocating for you, to you, helping you to see how you might grow, helping you to see what paths might exist, and actually just giving you somebody to kind of watch and pay attention to as well. Tell me about your mentors. This question's open to anybody. How many do you have? What sort of backgrounds do they have? How did you explicitly find them? And how long have you had mentors? So all the questions about mentors, tell me about your mentors and how you work with them.
I can start. Prior to joining 8 Light, my journey began with my cohort lead at the boot camp, who I can tell she served as my initial mentor. She consistently encouraged me, reminding me of my capabilities, and even when I felt like I knew nothing. Thanks to her guidance, I would say I was motivated to complete this bootcamp, and to even complete it earlier than I expected. Following that, I found a mentorship from Vlad Toader. He is a software engineer who aided me in my interview preparation. I think his invaluable advice resonated deeply with me. And he told me, you just need to be yourself. And I think this was such a great advice from here. Lastly, 8 Light. I had the privilege of learning from exceptional mentors, and in no particular order: Nicole Carpenter, who is a principal crafter, Melissa Middlebrooks, senior crafter, and Brian Swang, senior crafter. Each of them brought unique backgrounds and expertise to the table. And I'm so grateful for everything I learned and from them, and grateful just to meet them and be able to sit next to them and just learn from them. I think mentorship, it's very valuable. It's an informal relationship where an individual with more experience can share knowledge and everything to its mentee. So yeah, for me personally, mentorship was very crucial in my career development.
Thanks for that. A quick follow-up. Do all of your mentors know that they are your mentors?
Yes.
They do. Okay, great.
I mean, at least the 8 Light mentors from the 8 Light, they were in my team during my apprenticeship program. I don't know, the cohort lead from the bootcamp, I don't know if she knew it was really a mentor for me, but I hope she practically think that for all of us from that cohort, she was like a mentor, like, yeah, beside a teacher.
Okay, thank you.
I had a thought to share, just to add on to that, kind of with maybe the direction you're going, Amanda, with did people know that they were your mentors, which is like I've also had my formal mentors at 8 Light who have been so wonderful. But I also wanted to talk about like the informal mentors, or the people who maybe don't even think of themselves in that light, because I definitely have a few of those people who it started off just like more organically, or like asking for feedback on a specific thing, and then, you know, we kind of like hit it off, or there's just like opportunities to keep talking later on, and then it like turns into mentorship. And I was thinking about how I feel so bad, but I regularly get people on LinkedIn being like, I'm looking for a mentor, and like your experience is so interesting, and or like I also was in education, and I get so overwhelmed at the idea of like trying to mentor someone that I usually just like don't respond, which I feel I'm being vulnerable. I feel like really guilty about that, but I'm just like, I am so busy. Like, I honestly don't have time to do right by someone who needs mentorship. But if someone reaches out to me and they're like, you know, your experience is so interesting, I'm new in this industry, do you have time for half an hour to chat on Zoom? I can say yes to that. And I'm like, yeah, I totally have half an hour, even if it's not for a few weeks, like, let's get something on the books. Or if they like send me, I mean, that's honestly the thing that I'm most likely to say yes to, because showing up to a Zoom, you don't have to prepare anything. You have to use just to like talk is the easiest thing to say yes to. So that's my advice. If you're looking for a mentor and you see someone who you think looks really cool and like you could learn a lot from, do that. Don't say the word mentor. And don't, sorry, this is very specific. It's probably, I'm painting with a really broad brush here, but for me, at least, the other thing that feels too overwhelming is when someone sends me like a link to their portfolio and is like, can you give me a review? And that again is, I'm just like, oh, like that, to honestly do a good review is going to take like a few hours. But again, if we are on the Zoom and then you're like, hey, would you take a look at my portfolio, or can I just share my screen and get your thoughts? And then that is going to also feel like way different. Be like, yeah, totally. Like, let's choose one case study and let's look at it. So I think that like no one spelled that out for me when I was earlier in my career, and I wish they had, because that's, I think, where you're going to have a lot more success. And then a lot of times, like, you do hit it off and they're like, let's do this again, like, you know, reach back out next month or something, and then maybe it becomes a more regular thing. So that's my advice on like finding a mentor.
I love that. I think I heard you say, understand that your mentors are the people that you would like to have as mentors. They're human. They have a lot going on, and they're probably just like you in some ways, that they maybe don't even know that they are people's mentors sometimes. And it's hard for them to understand how they might be helpful without kind of specific asks that are very conscious of their time that you're asking for as well. So I love that advice. Really good. Kaitlyn, do you have?
I want to piggyback on both those things. I was going to say specific questions. If you're reaching out, like, be my mentor is not a specific question. That's, can you devote a huge chunk of time to me personally, versus, hey, or if you're looking at a portfolio review, not can you review my portfolio, is, do you think this specific thing works when I'm looking to get this type of job? Is a great question. That's the thing I can look at quickly and say yes, or here's a little tweak I might make. That's much easier than evaluate me as a whole person sort of thing. But the informal mentors thing really is important to me, because I've not ever been in a position where I had what I would call a formal mentor, in terms of, this is one person who knows a lot about the thing I want to do, and they can sort of help me guide through. Every job I've had, I have usually been the person, with like one exception, I was the person who knew the most about whatever I was doing, which again doesn't say I was amazing. It was just like, I got hired on a place where they didn't have senior developers. It was just me. Or I was hired on a team with people who weren't in the development space. They were very good at their own things, but they weren't developers. So that wasn't like I had a mentor. But what I've had is a lot of, you might say, I would call them informal mentors, but it's also just learning from people who know the stuff I don't know. And so the examples I'll give is, so my wife actually is a huge mentor for me. They're a business analyst, so they can program and code, but they are really also good at process, and they are really good at people. And so in the 10, 15 years I've known them, they have really helped me expand in those areas that I was not great on when I started out. I could program, but I wasn't great at process, or learning about process, or helping to manage people through process. And so just talking to them about things, or having them tell me about what they do, that really helps me. And then the other thing is, so I learned this in high school when I was on the basketball team. They were always saying, we don't have time to run all of you through every drill. So what you need to do is be really good at learn by watching, which is, you should not have to do the thing to start to get your grasp. Don't wait until you're doing the thing to start learning about the thing. Watch everyone else go through it. Put yourself in their perspective. Imagine how you might make decisions. That way, when you do go practice it, you already have that mental practice first. And so I get a lot of informal mentorship that way, especially at 8th. So we work with a couple of really amazing people like Pia in product. I will just watch how she does things, and I can learn through that. And then later I'll go and ask her like 1 or 2 specific questions. Hey, why did you do that? Or why? How does that work? And that's how I learned a lot about product and how product works, just by literally watching her work and then answering the specific questions. I don't know if she would think that she's my mentor, but she's definitely a huge mentor for me when it comes to product. just through working with her. So things like that, I think that the informal mentorship is huge to grow in areas you're not already comfortable with.
I love it. I think I heard a few different things there, but an important thing that I want to pull out is the different people are mentors in different ways and for different things. You don't have to look at somebody and say, you are my ideal human being that I want to be. No, you're really good at this thing that I want to get better at. So you're my mentor for that thing. And that's a whole lot less pressure for the mentor as well. Are any of you mentors? Two absolute yeses, and Claudia not quite shaking her head yes, but I think from what I've seen in my interactions with all of you at A-Flight and other people behind the scenes, because we're virtual, I often have conversations where all of your names get dropped regularly as people who are regularly looked up to. So I think whether you know it or not, you are mentors, and I appreciate all of the work that you're doing there. I hear also when I'm talking about mentorship, I hear people talk about sponsorship and that being a different thing than mentorship. Does anybody have insight or thought and as to what is the difference between those two things, and is one more important than the other?
So I'm not super familiar with the term. The difference I think I've seen, what I would call sponsorship is, I would say it's a little bit selfish. So when I've tried to do it, it's a little bit selfish on my part. It is, so mentorship is, I want to help you grow. And we're talking more formal than informal, but I want to help you grow, I want to help you learn. Whereas sponsorship is, I want to sort of promote you internally, not promote like role, but like I want to surface your name. I want to make you available for things. I tend to do that. It's selfish, but it's selfish. It's helpful to both people, which is, I want to work with this person, both because I think it would be good for them, and I think it would be good for me to work with that person because I know their skills, and I really want to, I think it would be a good complement to my team. So to me, that's the really useful kind of sponsorship, because I don't think I would ever do it in a case, and I've not done it in a case where I was like, oh, this would be helpful for me, but not for them. I try to make sure it is actually a good fit for both. I think there are things you can learn, and I definitely think bringing your skill set in helps me. That's the, I would say, the great kind of sponsorship where it's beneficial to everyone. I can't speak to anyone else's experiences, but
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And I love your interpretation there. I do feel like when people tell me what it is they're trying to achieve, it gives me opportunities to look for the things that maybe give them experiences in that direction. And sort of, again, the concept of vulnerability coming out, telling people, where do you want to go, as opposed to letting your career happen to you. You actually have to take a step and saying, here's what I want, so that somebody might be able to sponsor you in that direction. So, okay. What about allyship? Do you have any thoughts around what does it mean? What does allyship mean? Have you ever experienced it? What does it look like? Have you participated? Does allyship mean anything to anyone in this room?
I think allyship, I mean, it's so important. I've definitely experienced it and also tried to be an ally to other groups. But I have one experience that I still think about. This was probably like 5 or 6 years ago when I was much more junior on one of my first clients, and there was like a mid-level design manager guy at the client. And it was like in a room, I was like always the only woman in the room with this particular group, and like one of the other designers at the client, this is all at the client, not A-Flight people, because they tend to be of a higher caliber. But at the client, a man like talked over me, as often happens. And this like very just sort of dry, like middle manager dude interrupted him and was like, Eva was actually talking. And it like blew my mind because I wasn't expecting it from him. He didn't see, I don't know. And I like still think about that years later, and try to like also just interrupt things the way he did. So I think just like little things like that really, really, really matter, because suddenly I was like, oh, Andy's got my back. Like I had no idea. And now I feel like much safer around him. I feel safer in this whole group. And like just so much more respected. And so like just like really little things like that can be so powerful. So yeah, I definitely try to do that for other groups, but I feel like maybe it's more important to not talk about that side of things, and just like strive to do it. Like just thinking about the times that it's helped, that someone has helped you, and then like how can you do the same thing for when it's like someone else and you are the one with the power to like interrupt that interaction.
I love the concept of recognizing power dynamics and thinking about where can I help? How can I make this person have a better experience when it seems like something is happening that shouldn't be? How can I help that? That's fantastic. Eva, you're an active member of the promotion panel at Eighth Light. Has your career journey influenced your perspective on career advancement, advocating for yourself, advocating for others?
Yeah, for sure. So being on the promotion panel has been really cool. It's been really eye-opening to see just how intense the process is to get promoted and how seriously you have to take it, which is a good thing about Eighth Light. I think plenty of companies, it's like just promoting based on vibes, which obviously gets, that becomes like ripe with bias and different things. So it's good we have such an intense process. But it is also just very intense. So something that kind of comes to mind with this question is just the need to, like you said, advocate for yourself, but specifically, this is advice I always give to like junior people or people I'm mentoring, is to, at the end, like every Friday afternoon, just like write down any wins you had, any successes, any like skills you've leveled up on, and then use that when it comes time to do your self-review every year or twice a year, however often you're doing it. And then that is also something you can use to help when you are putting yourself up for promotion or however it works, is to just have that list. Because if it's like been 3 years in a row and you're like, I totally should be getting promoted, but you're like trying to think back on like, what are all the things that I did that were really good, and you haven't written it down, it's just going to be really tough. So I think just thinking about it in terms of like, no one's advocating for you. Maybe if you have a sponsor, but even then you still have to be advocating for yourself. So just like taking a few minutes every week to like, just basically like invest in your future by kind of like, right, just noting everything that you've done so that you're ready when it comes time to talk about how great you are.
Great takeaway, immediately valuable. I love that. Thank you. Kaitlyn, we talked about you being promoted twice within a year, everything happening so fast. Do you ever feel imposter syndrome? Is that an issue for you? Have you had to navigate any of those feelings? Any advice that you'd give to others that might be going through that?
No, I'm amazing. No, actually, so I'll say I had imposter syndrome after accepting the invite to this call, because we got a note, it's like, hey, do you want to do this panel? Great. And then I saw that Eva was going to be on this panel. I read Eva's book before I'd ever even heard of Eighth Light, and I was quoting from it before I'd ever heard of Eighth Light. So I was like, what possible advice would I have? Why wouldn't you just listen to what Eva has to say? But that's where, so that was the first level of thinking. My second level of thinking as well, we have different experiences. We have different things to say. That's how I try to get around those feelings of imposter syndrome. And it's knowing what I know and knowing what I don't know, and knowing that those are different things. And there are other people, sort of like we said about the, when you're in competition for we're trying to get a job, other people have different skills. They might be better at some things than you are. Like, no, they're definitely better at some things than you are, but you also might be better at some things than they are. So it's recognizing that, yes, I do have value. I know these things. And I also know that I'm not great at these things. Actually, a friend of a friend wrote the Flutter library cross-platform development. I can't write Flutter. I would feel extremely dumb trying to talk to that person about writing cross-platform things. But if we're talking about TypeScript, I probably can do that a little bit better than he can, simply because that's not his focus. And it doesn't mean either one of us are bad or worse. We just have different skills. So that's the biggest thing for imposter syndrome, is knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know and being okay with those things. And to the point of mentorship, trying to improve on those things you don't know.
Love that. Absolutely. Remembering that we're all different, we're coming from different places with different skills is, I think, so imperative. I love that. I have a question that's open to anybody. I want to talk about comfort zones. Like, when you're changing careers, when you're looking at driving your career forward, often you have to step outside of your comfort zone. Can you share a moment when you had to step outside your comfort zone and it led to an unexpected but rewarding opportunity?
I can start. Um, just give me a second. So, I'm thinking that ever since I made the decision to change my career path, every action I've taken has pushed me beyond my comfort zone. But I've approached it gradually, step by step, taking each step with determination. And now the ultimate reward is being my seeing my dream working in the tech industry come true. It's very important to just I would say take it step by step. Even this participating in this conversation is another step outside of my comfort zone. Public speaking is not a forte for me, as you can tell, but I'm excited to share my journey with all of you. And I will be sure to keep you updated on my unexpected opportunities that arise from this particular experience.
I love that. I think you come off as very natural, and I love getting to hear your advice. So I absolutely thank you for that.
I have one I can share. So like I mentioned earlier, I did like a part-time job. Like this is while working at A-Flight, but it was like the evening remote UX course that my boot camp did. I taught a few sections of that just to like have some extra income. And basically I had done my talk, the first talk I did designing against domestic violence. And it was getting I was getting a lot of I was applying to different conferences that had an open call for proposal and getting it accepted a lot of places. And I was like, this feels like it feels really important to me. Like I'm so energized by it. And it seems like it's like hitting a nerve with other people, like they want it at their conferences. And it was like this huge decision of like, do I give up this like kind of like nice lucrative side hustle that I have in order to focus my free time on like this other work that is like not paid. It's a ton of work. I'm also not a natural public speaker, although it has gotten easier over many years. But it was like just this huge like mental crisis for me for like months of like, what do I do? And I finally ended up like quitting that job and just like, and being like, okay, I'm going to go all in on this for 1 year and see what happens. And then I can always like try to get a different side hustle if this just totally like flames out. I think like having that time was really helpful for me in terms of thinking, like framing it, like it's just 1 year. And then I can switch gears if it's not working out. But it did work out, and I got to speak like a lot. I've spoken internationally, and then it also led to my book deal and getting to publish my book Design for Safety. And the other sort of thing that like comes up is that I had no idea that there was going to be like a book deal at the end of this. That was like never something that was on my mind. It was literally just like conference speaking. I'm getting some traction. I should really like focus more so that I can like take this further. And then it ended up like make a mentor of mine who is an author. She's actually a career coach who I hired. So you can also just like pay people to like help you. But she is the one who like I like talked to about like writing a book eventually. So it led to this really, really good place, and it's been really awesome for my career. So I think sometimes taking risks. I mean, it's not like I quit my actual job. So it was like a smaller risk, but taking like those calculated risks and giving yourself like a certain number of months or like 1 year to like try to make something happen, I think can really work out.
Awesome. I also love the idea of you can pay somebody to help you. That's you can have mentors that you pay, right? Like they're not necessarily mentors when they're getting paid for it in the informal sense, but it's a very valid, very valuable piece of choosing the direction of your career. I love that. What about work-life balance? Work-life balance, self-care, these are crucial for long-term career success and your own personal well-being. How do you prioritize those aspects of your life and career planning in such a way that you hopefully avoid burnout?
So I used to be really bad at work-life balance. This is actually a endemic among I'd say newspapers in general, but there are lots of industries where they sort of prey on your passion to get you to do as much work as they possibly can while not paying you enough. So unfortunately, it was only after I did burn out that I did realize you do have to set those boundaries. And even if you're enjoying it or it seems like you have to, there comes a certain point where you just can't continue doing something. And even if you're really enjoying it, if you don't stop and set boundaries for yourself, you can't continue enjoying it because you're going to burn out. So I hope that people don't have to go through that ultimate burnout point before they get there, but it is important to, let's say, listen to yourself, listen to your body, and listen to your whatever warning signs. They're warning signs for a reason. And so taking care or paying attention to those things and making sure you focus on them is extremely important to make sure you can continue doing the things you enjoy. Because once you're burned out, you can't do even the things you thought you liked.
Great advice. Great advice. And I do hear that story so often. You get to the breaking point and then you have to kind of figure it all out. So hopefully folks on the call can figure out paths to not have to burn out first by having some guidance that it's coming, it can come, it can happen when you're not expecting it. So just pay attention. It's March of 2024, and I would not be able to participate in any kind of panel without bringing up the topic of AI. So I really want to make sure we touch on that as a last sort of moderated topic before getting into the questions that the audience wants to know about. So with the emergence of generative AI, and while we're in a declining job market, what advice might you offer to someone to brave the storm and end up on top? Does generative AI specifically impact the job market? How do you tell people to think about AI and the job market and figuring out their career path?
So my advice, AI is really hard to talk about because I would say if you were looking for a job, taking jobs that are related or specifically revolve around AI is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Just be aware of the larger industry trends, which is right now there's probably too much AI, or we're trying to have AI do too many things it can't actually do. So be aware that that might be temporary or that might be changing. So don't just get the job and sit on it or do sort of what you're told. Find whatever makes it unique. Find that way that you bring value to the job if you can get those things. And that's how you can sort of aim your career in a trajectory where you're not just adjusting to the winds. Because if you were in the same position 4 years ago, it might have been, holy crap, I need to learn blockchain. I need to get a blockchain job. And if you had done that, by about now, there are blockchain jobs, but there are not nearly as many blockchain jobs as everyone thought there would be. I do think we're going to see a similar thing in AI. So it's not to say don't go into those things and not to focus on those things, but just make sure you're aware of broader trends and shifts so that you're not stuck I'm just the AI person. No, I am the developer, designer, whatever, who can use AI properly to provide value.
Yeah, just piggybacking on that, I feel like there's two things with AI. There's like you're either making stuff in AI as like a career trajectory, and then there's like the side of like you're a designer, you're a developer, or whatever, and you are like using AI to make your job like easier and move faster and like maybe do things with a little bit of like a higher quality. And that is like that can be like tough, but I think I've been to a few workshops, like Figma has done some, or like more like webinars I just did one that Figma put on about like designers using AI, and I think I feel like the thing, and Kaitlyn makes a really good point that who knows if this advice none of this might matter in a year, but for now at least, I do think people are wanting to hire people who like at least kind of like understand what this is, and can kind of use it. So I think like a common interview question that's coming up is like, how are you using AI to like in your own work? So just having a few things where like, well, I use, Figma has some AI stuff now that I'm using to like more quickly do research synthesis. Like you still have to know what to do, but it's just gonna like move things along a little bit faster. Like I was just doing that with my apprentice the other day of let's see how this is gonna sort like all of these sticky notes that you have from your research. And it did sort them into 3 meaningful categories pretty nicely, but then we still ended up breaking those up into like 15, like much more meaningful and like useful categories. So it's stuff like that where you're able to articulate like, yes, I understand some of how AI works and this is how I use it in my job. I think it's going to be really helpful, at least for the time being.
One thing I really want to make sure I emphasize, and I'm glad you brought that up, which is, especially for people who aren't quite as far along in their careers, using AI use AI to give you advice or to give you ideas, but make sure you understand what it's doing, or make sure you understand the underlying framework, precepts, whatever, because if AI is doing the actual work, then you can be replaced by the AI. Most of the time AI isn't good enough to get it exactly right. To Steve's point, like he gave them like 3 categories, but you might want to make it into more finely tuned things. If you only know how to do it with AI and you don't know the actual thing of how to do it, then you're in a much worse position than if you know how to do it and can use AI to enhance and make your own work faster. So don't just use it to replace the actual work that needs to be done.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. We're just looking at the clock. I want to ask a couple of questions that came in during registration. What advice might you give someone fresh into the tech world looking to build their professional experience, especially those who are struggling to land their first job? So we've got a couple of questions around folks who may be new to the industry, limited experience. Maybe they have had their first job, but they are out of work now during the big boom of layoffs, or maybe they've not even found their first job yet. Any advice that you'd give them to help to build their professional experience without a full-time job, or advice, how do they land a job when circumstances are as they are right now and really difficult market?
I can share my experience. So while there's no one size fits all approach, I'm just talking about my experience when I started to look for a job in tech. So instead of fixating on my limited experience, I focused on highlighting my strength and what I could contribute to a company beyond just technical knowledge gained from bootcamp or from courses or tutorials I've watched. I think, in my opinion, in the tech industry, coding skills alone may not suffice to secure a job. It requires more. And I can give some examples like creativity, problem solving in general, collaborative team member, sharing now knowledge with others, or being honest with oneself and team members. I think these are crucial attributes. And I think this can help set you apart and make a positive impression to a potential employer. Yeah, so these are my advice for someone new and want to land on a tech job.
Fabulous. Thank you for that. I think that's fantastic advice. Another person has asked, how do you deal with job gaps and financial difficulty? They specify that they don't think maybe that a 9 to 5 is necessarily going to be their cup of tea, and they eventually want to pursue entrepreneurship. How do you deal with job gaps? Has anybody experienced that, or, know folks who worked with folks who have, or how might you suggest that they deal with that?
I'm not sure exactly what the question is in terms of, I don't know if like how do you get through a job gap financial difficulty, or how do you address it if you're trying to apply later with that. I would say during times of great upheaval, people understand that people get laid off and they don't have jobs. So I wouldn't worry about that as much. I graduated actually into the recession of 2000, right after the recession, 2008, 2009. So it was very understandable when people did not have jobs, and they were just like, yes, no one expected you to have a job. No one had a job. So from that perspective, I don't think it's as big a deal because people know what the industry situation is. As far as financial difficulty, I really only have the basic things to give, which is reduce your expenses as much as you can. And even if you do want to pursue entrepreneurship, I would generally say try to make sure you have a plan for how you're going to make that happen. Don't just say, I'm going to pursue entrepreneurship, quit, and then go try to do it. Lay your groundwork in advance, plan for how you might be able to subsist for a couple months before you have any revenue. Don't just, there's taking risks, but there's also taking calculated risks. Don't just say, I'm going to do it and throw everything to the wind and hope it's going to work out. It does sometimes, but not always.
Yeah, and I just want to add one more thing, which is having been on the other side of hiring, if I see a gap, even one like the ones Kaitlyn mentioned, like the recession, and then obviously we're in this like weird tech like downturn right now. But even when I see other gaps, I'm like, oh, I don't know, maybe they had a kid. Like, I don't know, it's not something that I'm necessarily like looking at. And granted, like, I think, some people and maybe some companies might not, like they might be looking at that with more critically, which is like a crappy reality. But I think a lot of people aren't looking at that as like, oh, you're immediately disqualified because you didn't work for these 2 years or something. Like they're like, most people are going to be like, there's probably a story there, and like are more interested in like what's in your portfolio, what skills you have, et cetera, et cetera. So I would just kind of throw that out there as like hopefully this person can feel less like, if you're feeling really like nervous about those things, or like that you're going to have to like explain yourself. I would say it's usually like a blip in the overall sort of like picture of someone that we're looking at in terms of hiring.
I think that's totally spot on. There are many companies who look at this very differently than they did 15 years ago. I'm the same way when I'm reading a resume. I don't even look. It would have to be pretty massive for me to even notice. But I know that there are companies, big companies, who may look at it differently. We do have one question from the audience that I want to get out there in our last couple of minutes. When discussing allyship, Eva made the important point in recognizing that power differentials come into play in some of these discussions. I'm curious to know what advice you might give to people earlier in their careers on how they can still effectively advocate for themselves or others when they might have less leverage or influence. Or perhaps could you share some examples of challenges you faced earlier in your career and how your approach has evolved as you've gained more leverage, and how would you have addressed it differently in hindsight?
This is such a good question. And I have one just immediate thought, because I get this a lot with my work designing for safety, when people are like, how can we, there's just usually not institutional support for like, let's take the time to see if like someone could misuse this for harm in an interpersonal context, is like not something people are usually like telling their teams to do. So and I think this piece of advice really applies here, which is to like basically like back channel with your peers. And before you're going to bring something up, like if you are like, hey, we want to start this initiative, or we think it's like important to like whatever it is your goal is, like talk to other people beforehand, so that when you, and then bring it up publicly in a meeting, so that when you do that, like someone else can immediately be like, +1 to that. I think that's really important. And, here's maybe we could, just spend 1 hour a week on it for the next 6 weeks, and then kind of like regroup after that and see if it warrants more time. And that's the other piece of advice I always give people, is like have a specific thing you're trying to do and make it like not too much time. I don't know if this is like a broad question, so forgive me if this isn't really the terms that you're thinking of, but but like doing that sort of like back channeling to get support from the people just like in your peer group. It doesn't have to be like the higher up people. And then also having your very specific ask of like what you actually want. Cause I think it's really easy to kind of like gripe about things, and that's like really fun. But at the end of the day, it's like, what are you actually trying to achieve? So going in with like, you know, we want to be able to form like a DEI group or whatever it is to like improve the culture at our company. And we want like 1 hour a week for that. Like having your very specific ask in place as well can be helpful.
I love that answer. Something that I want to pull out from that is often when you're in a meeting and you have everybody seems to agree with this person's wonderful idea, what you didn't see was behind the scenes before that meeting, they had kind of socialized that idea and gotten some buy-in. So they had the group of people who were all sort of on the same page. So it was easy to agree in the meeting because they'd all kind of already talked about it. People newer in their career often don't know that. They've not seen it before, but please understand that could be happening behind the scenes, and you can take advantage of that tip as well. Go and socialize your ideas. And then when you would present it in the meeting, you'll have more buy-in. Okay, we're at time. This has been too short. We should have another hour. I've been muted. Okay, I really appreciate all of your advice. And please reach out on LinkedIn. Reach out if you're a person who doesn't know who your mentors are or doesn't really have any mentors, wants guidance around that, reach out. If you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate. We're here. And I think having a network of people in the industry who are there looking out for each other is just so valuable. And I appreciate your time today. So thank you, all of our panelists. You're amazing, whether you say you are or not. I really appreciate all of your guidance.